Hi, welcome to the 18th season of the Productized podcast. My name is Andre, and I'm hosting today's episode. We're diving deep into product challenges and emerging opportunities. And today we have a very special guest who, among other things, we kind of share the same name, but he brings a wealth of experience from both engineering and product management. Andy Nesling, head of engineering and product at Cervus. Andy's career spans over 2 decades, and in that time, he has driven innovation in robotics, IoT, product management at leading companies like Dyson and now Cervus. With extensive experience in scaling engineering teams and developing complex products, Andy has seen firsthand the challenges of adapting to changing technological landscapes. Andy, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Andre. Great to be here.
All right, so let's start maybe with this new company that you are at the moment, Cervus, the defense tech company, which is, very close to my heart as well, as we're talking about that just before the podcast. We're also leading the defense tech meetup here in Lisbon, trying to kickstart some of the very nascent and very still nimble defense tech sector in the country, although there are some success stories that we should talk about. So before we do that, let's just break the ice. We usually do a few very light questions just to get to know you a little bit better as a product person. So what's your favorite app or tech product right now, or appliance or gizmo, whatever?
What's favorite Apple tech product? So I think I am really enjoying Audible at the moment. I mean, so Audible combined with decent Bluetooth headphones is excellent from my perspective, because I'm able to listen to a whole host of audiobooks I otherwise wouldn't have the time to do. So my journeys to work, I can listen to audiobooks on the bike. I go out running, I can listen to audiobooks, and it's a wonderful way to get a lot of information on areas that I would never find the time to carve out for otherwise.
Right. Yeah, me too. I love Audible and audiobooks. One of the things that sometimes comes to my mind is for informative books, right? Sometimes you want to take notes, you want to write something down, you want to just jot some thoughts, and Audible is not very friendly towards that. Also, the context of use, which is commuting, walking, running, cannot really stop and let me just write this thing that I've just listened to, right? And it's really hard to take note. So what's the most unusual or interesting thing about you that people cannot find online or publicly, or maybe not just so well known?
Yeah, I mean, most unusual. I mean, probably you can find most things about people online now.
If you have the right, yes, you can.
I think most unusual is I hold a Guinness World Record.
Really?
For cycling a 7-seater conference bike where you sit all around in a circle across the length of the UK, so from Land's End to John O'Groats.
Wow. How many I don't know days were that cycling?
So it was we did it, so it's 600 miles, and we did it in just under 6 days, and that was we had 2 teams of people, and we kept the bike moving 24 hours a day.
Okay, so you actually get to sleep a little bit.
A little bit. Every few hours, you've got a couple of hours to sleep. Yes.
Wow, that's crazy.
You learn a lot about teamwork doing that session.
Why did you do that? Was that like a work challenge, and someone came up, let's do this?
Yes, I guess it was a group of friends. So we did it for a charity called Cyclists Fighting Cancer, who bring bikes to children going through cancer treatments to help keep them active, which was brilliant. So they they actually helped provide logistics for us as well whilst we were doing it, which made it possible.
Very well. Well, congratulations. All right. So if you've never stumbled upon product or a product engineering job, which is still what you're doing nowadays, what do you imagine? What do you imagine you would be doing today? In fact,
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean,
if you go to an alternative universe and you meet your Andy, what would that Andy be doing?
So I've been doing product stuff for such a long time. It's been such a core part of what I do. I've been doing it for a long time before I even knew that it was product ownership, product management. So I think probably the thing that I stumbled into, I think, was really the toolbox that comes with approaching product management with an agile mindset. And I think probably if I hadn't stumbled into that, I would probably be doing the same sort of thing that I'm doing now, but just finding it really, really hard because I wouldn't have half the tools I needed in order to work out how to do the role properly. So there'd be probably I'd be doing a lot of like project management without necessarily understanding that you need to focus on what the customer needs and you can change what you build to meet the customer needs, if that makes sense, rather than just delivering what's being asked for. So I think probably I would be doing a similar thing, but just not enjoying it half as much as I enjoy it now.
All right, so let's start diving into innovation and today's product world. We've been deeply involved in development of IoT and robotics. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about what you've been doing for the last 10 years or so?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess, so looking 10 years back, I was working for a startup that was spun out from Oxford University. And that's really where I was introduced to agile software development. So I hadn't really come across it truly before then. And that's where I was introduced to a completely different way of thinking about it. I mean, it's really important in a startup anyway, that agility, but also like the techniques that come with it, like building stuff with tests in place so that you can change it safely. As you need to change it, you can. So that was my real first introduction to agile, I guess, was for a startup. I then moved on to Dyson from that startup, and I did quite a number of things at Dyson over the 8 years that I was there. Definitely felt like working for a lot of different companies during that time.
Any specific project comes to mind out of this public products that are out there from the company?
Yeah, so I guess I'm probably the most recent product I was working on, which was the robot vacuum cleaner, the Dyson BizNav, the most recent one. That was the first time that I'd worked on robotics at all, and I actually started working on that product just as we went into the first COVID lockdown. So I literally started as a product manager with that team, and then everybody was remote. So that was very memorable, having to learn a completely new domain, and when all of a sudden everybody's learning how to work differently as well. That was very, very interesting. I think the main takeaway that I brought from my time at Dyson was understanding how do you scale up that agility, that agile mindset, without breaking it. Because in order to build a robot vacuum, we had like 20 odd teams developing the software that was going into it. So how do you do that in such a way that you remain true to the ability to be able to change as you're learning? Because that gets harder and harder as you have more and more teams working together.
Yeah, and especially when it involves hardware, right? Where
absolutely
iterations are expensive and timely, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You cannot just compile the code again because each compilation will cost you $100K to do the molds and all that.
Yeah.
So better not screw it too many times, or just be very agile. But we'll get into that part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, and then I guess so up to the present day. So most recently, so I'm now working for Cervus, which is a company that is looking to bring agility to military training. Which is military training. Yeah. So it's a completely new sector for me. I've never worked in the defense sector before, and the thing that brought me there was really the idea of how can you bring agility to a completely different industry, but also exposure to completely different industry and all the things that you can learn from that. So I've recently read quite a few different books from.
And anything comes to mind?
So quite a few. So Team of Teams was an absolutely wonderful book. I got a tremendous amount of that. I think that's written by McChrystal, I think. Wrote Team of Teams.
The general.
The general, that's right. Then Extreme Ownership as well. That I really like that. That was great. And then I think Turn the Ship Around as well by the submarine captain.
That's my. Yeah. We share the same surname. We're not family. Yeah, by Marquet, the submarine commander.
Yeah. And it just felt like there's an awful lot of opportunity to learn and different ways of doing things and help hopefully bring some different ways of doing things as well.
All right. So you've been diving deep into the defense stack and the defense mindset. And just as a segue there, for many, no pun intended, I know you worked for Dyson for a few years, but the the military sector and the defense has traditionally been, especially in the last few years, it has been changing, but it has been very traditionalistic. Also for good reasons, right? There's good reasons to keep tradition in the military sector in many ways, but agility and being fast and doing things and breaking things in a non-metaphorical way is not something that the military would be doing, right? Purchase processes take many years sometimes. Most new product developments, they are sometimes 10x times over budget. They take much longer than they were supposed to. So over budget, over time, that has been the tradition for many military projects all across the world, not just in big militaries, but also a little bit all across NATO. The mindset is also now changing in defense tech, and or better yet, in the defense sector. And I guess a big part of that is also because of defense techs like Cervus, right?
Absolutely.
Which are bringing a new way of thinking, a new way of doing things, but also, things are changing, times are changing, also due to the constraints in the military. So what's the whole thesis of Cervus is that if you train faster, you are still able to achieve the same results, provided you're using augmentation of technology to do that. What's the underlying thesis of the company?
Yes, I guess one of the key things is bringing data to allow you to understand how effective you're being. So, I mean, it's something that we're really quite familiar with in an agile product management sector, is making data-driven decisions. And that is really one of the key elements of Cervus. Is how can you bring that data to inform how effective you're being in terms of your training and the decisions that you're making, which aligned very well with the things that I was doing even at Dyson in robotics. It was surprising the parallels between the things that we were having to consider for how we could make the robot better, what we had to measure, how we could gather the data and present it. And there were there was an awful lot of parallels to the things that you need to consider when you're looking to train a military. Well,
so in your time at Dyson, you manage products that blended hardware and software, right? Because when you're building a vacuum cleaner, which is essentially a robot on wheels, a big part of it is the software that goes into that little robot, and it keeps being updated over the year, over the life cycle of the product. And so how does that kind of product management differ when working with complex integrated technologies like robotics, IoT, versus more traditional software products when you can just launch an update and, people sometimes don't even realize it's there?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite different. So having sort of jumped into it and not having had exposure to robotics before, I was finding that the tools that I was used to using weren't effective because the problems that we were facing were complex problems, and that actually you needed to use different tools. I was quite lucky actually that when I started working on robotics, because we'd got into a COVID lockdown, I had a lot of time to read. So I was reading around crikey, this is a different sort of problem. What are the tools available to help with it? And I came across a book that had just been published at that point on Kinefin, which then led me into the whole world of complex adaptive systems and the sort of tools and frameworks that you've got to help you deal with those problems, and really sort of classifying the problems in terms of, well, if you've got a complex problem, the only way you can solve it quickly is actually by running parallel experiments. The iterative approach, whilst you can do it, is a very slow approach to get to a solution.
Very interesting.
So that was one of the elements. I think that then led me on to then looking at things like Wardy mapping as well, with a view to sort of understanding the landscape you're working in, understanding how the technology is evolving, and where you need to be, what bits of technology you need to be looking at. And I think the other thing that probably helped them was a systems thinking approach, because as when you've got all of those different moving parts to be, certainly I found that to be an effective product manager, I needed to have a higher level view and understand how are all these bits ultimately coming together to deliver a solution to the problem our customers got. Because it's very, very easy to get lost in all of the technical detail and lose track of how are all these bits ultimately going to make the life better for our customers.
All right, so let's take this example of the vacuum cleaner, which is a great example also for that, because when we think about customers and how they want to get their job done, which is get house clean, the space, what do you think product managers need to keep in mind to stay ahead of the curve and not get caught up in the race of new features or technology for just technology's sake? Because this segment, as much as I know, was disrupted by Boston Robotics firstly, right? When they launched the Roomba, iRobots, I believe was the name of the company behind it. And then all these premium companies like Dyson. But now you have a bunch of other companies in that sector as well, which are giving much more affordable appliances. So what do you think, if you're talking with product managers in these companies, what kind of recommendation would you allow them to think about to really not get ahead of the curve and not get caught in the rat race for new features just for the sake of features, right?
Yes, I mean, in some ways it's probably not so different in working on a complex product like a robot as it is for any other product. It might be easier to find yourself going down that rabbit hole. But I mean, the thing that I found most important is literally taking it back to what is the problem that we're solving for the customer. If ultimately all of this technology is not allowing us to make the problem that the customer's got any better for them, then it's truly not going to be delivering value. And I think, I mean, it sort of in some way takes me back to why I quite enjoy the sort of Audible experience at the moment, is that there's quite an awful lot of technology going on there in order for you to be able to listen to easily download audiobooks, stream them seamlessly to your headphones, etc. But you're not really aware that there's so much technology going on there. It all just works. And I think really from a customer's perspective, technology is doing the best job when you don't even notice it. And that was certainly something that I think was really important for us, building something like a vacuum. You want the robots to go out and vacuum your home when you're not there. You don't want to see it doing the job. You just want to come back and actually your home's all clean, and because it's done the job for you. So exactly. Yeah. I mean, the first time you get it and you're watching it go round, you're like, oh, that's really cool, that's amazing. And then very quickly you're like, yeah, I just wanted to do it, but I'm not there. I don't even want to see it doing it. So I think that's the thing, is bringing it back to, with all of the different technology that you can engage, if ultimately that technology is not allowing you to solve the problem that the customer's got better for them, then it's unlikely to be delivering the value that you need from it.
So what are the unique challenges of leading product and engineering teams in this, I guess, also hybrid setup that you've been through the last few years, and things might have changed, but when you are developing hardware, you can only do it remotely to a point, right? Because at least some people have to actually go there and work on the physical product. So how did that go? How did you go through the pandemic in the first place? Because people sometimes, especially if they have been peppered to work in the software industry, they don't realize that many jobs you have actually to be in the office, to be in the workshop, to develop stuff. You have to solder pieces of, resistors and stuff inside these PCBs. You cannot just do it online. How did you go through that?
No, it's a good one. I think to be honest, in all honesty, I think actually the force that we were given by COVID actually helped us develop a better set of tools than I think we would have had otherwise. I mean, our development team, so even before COVID, our development team was split between the UK and Singapore. So geographically very, very different, time zone very different as well.
Why Singapore?
So primarily because it's very close to Malaysia, which is where we're actually building all of the products. So that's why it was Singapore. And what we found before we were forced to have everybody remote is that there would be very, very good conversations that were had in the office, and then the quality of the conversations that were had between people in different offices was significantly reduced.
Quick break. Did you know this year's Productized conference is a big one? We're celebrating our 10th edition. For a decade, we've been bringing product managers, designers, and innovators together in Lisbon for top-tier insights, interactive workshops, and invaluable networking. This year, it's bigger and better than ever with world-class speakers and special anniversary celebrations. Don't miss your chance to be part of it October 16th to 17th in Lisbon.
Join us for the big celebration. Tickets are now available at www.productized.co. We hope to meet you there.
And then once we were in a place where everybody was like lowest common denominator, everybody was remote. It forced us to work out how do we work in such a way that we can have those powerful conversations that everybody gets value from it. So having to do that just by teams that were potentially even like 10 minutes down the road, they were having to have those remote conversations. I think it forced us to pick up some really good techniques, which then when we came back to the office, we were having much better conversations across the whole team, and we kept those things going. So the idea of, for example, if there's just one person remote, then everybody getting on a headset. So rather than having everybody in a meeting room with a very bad speaker and a microphone, and the person that's remote is really struggling to hear, if there's one person remote, then let's all get on headsets, and it will make it easier for everybody. So it's little small things like that I think actually made really quite a big difference.
So how do you foster this collaboration and ensure that teams remain aligned when they're spread across different locations? And in this case, UK and Singapore, I think it's also a challenge because time-wise, you have, 7-8 hour time difference with them, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. And so certainly I think what we found actually was that regular syncs were very, very important. So the syncs that are sort of the daily stand-up that people were having, that became even more important when everybody was remote in terms of getting alignment. What we found actually, which initially felt like potentially like quite a waste, was that we were finding that a team was getting together and synchronizing themselves every day. Between the teams, we weren't necessarily synchronized. And so what we evolved to was basically having one person from each team every day, everybody one person from each team, all getting together and just literally talking about, well, look, this is what we're doing at the moment, this is what's blocking us. And it felt quite wasteful because you've potentially got 20 people getting together once every day just to go through that. But the amount of context that we were able to impart, the number of sort of alleys we didn't go down because everybody had a clearer idea of what each other team was doing, it was actually very worthwhile. I mean, we did an experiment. We said, well, look, you don't have to turn up to this. Turn up if you find it's valuable. And actually, almost all the time, people were turning up because they were finding it valuable. It was then actually reading Team of Teams where they took effectively a similar approach to information sharing, but actually on a much bigger scale. I think they had like 200 people dialing into the daily call to give context updates. I could start to understand that when you're working in a sort of a complex environment where you've got lots of teams all trying to integrate stuff remotely, actually it is a complex problem and you do have to take different approaches. So certainly that was another thing that helped. I think probably the last thing was then having a very clear set of OKRs for a defined period of time that everybody can get behind and understand, so that everybody's trying to move in the same direction, albeit in their discrete teams. Everybody's got a common view on the direction that we're trying to head. And that's something that definitely we improved on was getting better. Getting good OKRs is not straightforward.
No.
And that's something that definitely we got
We have
better.
several workshops every year. Just with this plug here. So as you know, we organize the Productized conference, and we've been doing it for almost 10 years. And every single year for 10 years now, we have a workshop on OKRs, right?
Yeah.
It's always one of the workshops that sells out the fastest, and is always packed because no matter what, people still struggle with it.
It's interesting actually with OKRs. It's related to one of the things you asked earlier about the challenges when you are working with hardware as well. Is what we found was getting the balance of how prescriptive the OKRs should be. For us, actually changed throughout the development life cycle of the product. In the early days, where we're literally trying to bring up the hardware, it was more valuable for our OKRs to be quite prescriptive in terms of, right, we will get the robots to achieve this thing. I think one of our first OKRs was like literally, can you clean a 1 by 1 meter pen? That's what we're focused on. It was doing that.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Because it's like the baby steps of robots. Okay, 1 by 1, and then 2 by 2, and eventually, an entire room.
But I mean, in order to get to that point, I mean, that was literally like 20 teams working for like 10, 15 weeks with all the different elements that we had to do in terms of like literally pulling information in from sensors, driving motors, starting to use the information from those motors and sensors to map the environment. There's a tremendous amount that had to happen in order just to be able to achieve that. And so in some ways, those OKRs were really quite prescriptive. It was like, literally, we need to do this. And then it was understanding that as the product matured, our OKRs needed to get less prescriptive. And it was like, we need to solve this problem for the customer. We don't know how. And it was interesting spotting that you needed to change how you were focusing the OKR. Because it's very easy to think, okay, right, this way of doing OKR is working, so we should keep doing this. And you've been in this prescriptive world because that's what you needed to get to where you were. But then the problem shifts, and actually, okay, right, well, now the way that we achieve solving the problem, there's a lot of different ways that we could solve the problem, and we need to give the team the autonomy to figure out the best way to solve this particular challenge. Like, for example, the robot getting stuck or getting lost in a dark area. I mean, and there are a lot of different ways that we could achieve a solution to that problem. And if we'd been very, very prescriptive and said, right, this is the way that we're going to do it, then almost certainly we wouldn't have solved the problem nearly as quickly for the customer. So that was the thing that certainly I took away as like, okay, the way that we do OKRs needs to be different depending on where we're at in the development of the product as well.
So just tell me a little bit about the innovation thesis, about going into entire new segments of products. So, in the case of Dyson, of course, they got very well known because of their initially vacuum cleaners, then the air dryers. 8 years or 7 years, they've been getting into air products. Also literally heating and cooling masses of air for inside rooms. Well, talking about the whole car experience, electrical car experience that didn't go through. Now you spoke about the Bluetooth headsets. And what's the underlying thesis to go into a whole new category? And of course, the vacuum, we can still be on the vacuum cleaner, the robotic vacuum cleaners. Because there were other companies doing that already in the market. What's the underlying motivation to go to a segment that is already being serviced by another company? Is it we think we can do better and serve the customer in better ways, or serve customers that are still not being properly served by this other solution? What innovation thesis here?
Yeah, I think it's very much, is there a gap in the problem that the customer needs solved? And I think absolutely for robot vacuum cleaners, there was a real gap, which is I want something that literally vacuums my home as effectively as I'd done it myself, but without me having to do it. So something that needed to have that power, it needed to have that ability to pick up literally like pet hair or carpets, etc., but do it without me having to do it. And that was the gap that we were going after.
Because it's quite interesting in the sense that iRobot was a robotics company, but they were not a vacuum cleaning company. And you guys, you were a vacuum cleaning company.
We came from the other direction.
Exactly. Yeah. So you kind of meet at the middle. I would say as a customer that I would probably trust Dyson to clean my floor better than a random robotics company. But what about the credibility to the client of exactly that? Okay, you recognize as the best in class vacuum cleaner. Why should I trust you to be also a good robotic cleaner, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, interestingly, I would say that's not so much the challenge that we had. I think literally our customers were coming to Dyson because they knew we would do the best job for them. And so the expectations on us were that we were going to be producing the best robot vacuum cleaner. So the expectation in terms of how the robot would navigate around, the fact it wouldn't get stuck, etc., etc. All of the robotics elements, the bar is very, very high, quite rightly so. And the challenge is that, I mean, robotics is an emerging technology, and so in order to be able to clean your home in a way that is like really robust and will do the same thing every time, is hard, because the technology is getting there, but it's not necessarily there yet. And it was how do we meet the customer's expectation with the limitations of the technology that we've currently got. And that was it.
All right. And then I guess some of those OKRs eventually it progressed towards the later stage, super challenging ones. All right, so let's dive into the more and shifting gears towards this leadership role, and particularly around long-term thinking. You've led teams through both high growth and transformative periods at companies like Dyson, now at Cervus at a different, more startup stage. How do you balance day-to-day product needs with the long-term vision required to drive innovation? Especially, I guess, in early stages it's still very much harder because there's so much to be proven yet, right? I mean, but still, I really want to hear.
Yeah, I think that in some ways that is I've seen a very, very similar challenge in all of the different companies I've worked in, which is how do you make enough time to be looking at innovation while still getting the things that you're currently working on out the door? And that is a big challenge. I mean, there are different ways. I mean, ultimately, I think somehow you have to be able to ring fence some of your capacity. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. You have to be able to ring fence a certain amount of your capacity to say, this is what we are going to spend this amount of time on actually in pushing forward innovation.
Are you adamant? Are you believing in this 80-20 rules that you should spend one day of the week just thinking about this more long vision?
I guess that's not what I've seen as being most effective. But I think the thing that I've seen being most effective is giving a number of people the space and with consistent space to be thinking and exploring. So rather than sort of doing it one day every 2 weeks or something.
Yeah,
it's having a group of people who have got the space to be able to think and innovate with a good block of time.
But can you be more specific? Because, how does that materialize in practice? It's like if someone from your team tells you, yeah, now I'm kind of going through this crazy idea, you encourage him or her to actually go that way. What does that actually feels like?
Yeah. No, well, there are different. There's a spectrum here. I mean, so one way you can do it is the way that certainly in a good part of the way that Dyson works, it is done, which is effectively we have literally people who do nothing but that. So there are groups who are dedicated to doing purely that innovation. So that is how you ring fence it. It's
disruptive.
Exactly that. Which is great because the thing with ring fencing is when the pressure comes on and you're trying to get something out the door and it's not working, there's always pressure to we'll not spend the time on the thing that's further out. We'll spend the time on the thing that we've got the pressure on now. Whereas if it's a completely different set of people, that's easier. The challenge that you have there is that the teams that are then sort of very separated don't see all of the challenges that you have with getting something out the door. They're not seeing that direct customer relationship either. They're not seeing firsthand the problems that customers are seeing. So I think in reality, the best is sort of somewhere between you carve out a little bit of time for every week or two, you have dedicated people. I think that the best balance is probably somewhere in between, where you have people that are dedicated to that and maybe they follow an idea all the way through. So they start off with that idea, but then they have to live with it.
Exactly.
I get it out, and then different people are rotating into that. Almost certainly, there's no right answer to that. You do have, whatever you do, and whichever way you approach it, I think the most important thing is holding firm that even when things aren't going well, you're still reserving your capacity to be working on innovation. Because if you're not, then absolutely it goes downhill very quickly.
That's so That's such a powerful thing, right? Because when you stop innovating, right, you are effectively losing your chances of survival in the medium long term, right? You're effectively stopping the engine that is going to make you be the bigger company. But there's so much pressure, right? In most companies, I would say, maybe people listening to this would say, yeah, that's maybe great for a big company like Dyson, but smallish companies, they cannot afford to have dedicated innovators just thinking about disruptive products that are going to disrupt the industry in 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Indeed, and I think as you scale it in a smaller company, I've absolutely worked in smaller companies,
right? Yeah,
where this has been the case. You have to say, well, maybe we're going to carve out a number of months for one or two people to focus on something. It's not dedicated, but I think you need a block of time to be able to do it, I think.
And how do you deal with the cost of opportunity? Because you might have this 2 or 3 competing, innovative, disruptive ideas. And how do you choose going with, AI for X or IoT for Y or, AR or whatever for Z? So how do you have this again? And resources are also very scarce by definition. Deal with this cost of opportunity innovation.
In terms of how you choose, I guess the way that I have historically chosen is by looking at which one of those is ultimately looking like it's going to have, is more likely to solve a problem that our customers have got. That is, you can bring into it sort of like the risk element, how likely is it to pan out? But I think the thing that's arguably more important is if they've sort of similar likelihoods to pan out, then the place to focus on is which one do we think would have the biggest impact on the customer were it to pan out.
All right, impact on the customer. Here we go. All right, so what kind of leadership strategy have you found most effective in ensuring that this product roadmaps align with, yes, customer is important, but also with business objectives, right? Because at the end of the day, you're working for an invested company or publicly traded company, or, there's a VC and they will ask, okay, guys, I want to see business objectives. So how do you do this alignment? How do you create these effective strategies?
Yeah. So the thing that I found most effective is actually involving the people who are setting or accountable to those business objectives in the priority and trade-off decisions you're needing to make in terms of where you're going to be spending your time on the product. So, and it's sort of related, it comes back to OKRs. So the way that we got more effective at doing OKRs was by actually involving the people in our business who were accountable for the performance of their business units, etc., in what should we be setting as the OKR? What is it that we want to improve? And look, we absolutely haven't got the capacity to be doing all of these things. These are the sorts of trade-offs that we can make. We can spend more time on innovation. We can spend more time on trying to get something out the door, and literally making it visible. So we would go through sort of a cadence, and it's different for different companies. At Dyson, we had a cadence of once every 10 weeks. We'd sort of get together and look at, okay, right, this is what is it we'd like to try and achieve over the next 10 weeks? What are the things that would be really impactful for us to achieve? We'd review and we'd look at like how much effort do we think that's going to be, and like actually, well, almost certainly it's going to be more effort than we've got the capacity to do. And then going around the loop and forcing ourselves to reprioritize and say, okay, well, given that we can't do it all, like we can do this or we can do this, but we can't do both. Ultimately, what's the thing that's going to be most impactful to our company and our customers? So that's personally what I've found to be the most valuable, is actually involving the people in the trade-off decisions you're having to make. And you naturally get very close alignment then between your product roadmap, your business objective.
Now moving maybe to this more recent experience of yours at Cervus, working in the defense sector was definitely not a sexy thing to do for many years. I don't think it still is, but it has changed. It has changed. I think if you were to say I'm working for a defense tech company maybe 10 years ago, people say, why? Now it is different. I think there's this feeling of responsibility and this ethos of resilience, had it's now being the term that I've seen used, that I think really reflects the state of our nations at this moment. So, but still, there's this ethical, maybe moral aspect to it that I think if you are working in the sector, even if it's a non-kinetic, non-lethal defense tech technology, which I guess it's the case for Cervus at the moment, but you never know, things might branch out. You might eventually go into that as well. How do you view this ethical decision making in your own product development process?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess for me, I mean, to be honest, I think this is a very personal thing. I think this will be different for every single person. I think for me personally, the thing that absolutely has driven my product decisions over the years that I've been working on products, and I've worked on sort of consumer products, I've worked on products that involve automating switchgear on the electricity network as well. And for all of the products that I've worked on, the thing that has been important to me is ultimately, is what we're doing benefiting the customer? I mean, that's the thing that I'm passionate about, something that got me into product management in the first place. It's like how does this thing work, and how can we use this thing to make life better for the customer? And I think if you're focused on, is what I'm doing ultimately making life better for the people that are going to be using this thing, then personally to me, it feels like, well, we're probably going in the right direction. I mean, certainly for a company like Cervus, what we're trying to do is ensure that people at the training that they're doing is effective to make them safer in the very dangerous job that they do.
But still, you might be confronted with moral options, like, will you be willing to sell this technology to, raged country in middle of Africa where this technology might be used to train militias that could eventually be, non-democratic state actors, or used for, pressing or oppressing populations specifically. So,
Yep.
How do you do that personal vision of yours? Is it a question of, well, while I'm working for democracies, this is fine, or as long as this is being sold to the UK government, it's fine? What's your red line, personal red line? If you have one, you might say, well, there's no red line. It's just whoever.
No, I absolutely do, and I think that red line problem. I mean, certainly for me, I think that was defined by how likely am I to be put in that situation where I am having to make that decision. I think is determined by the culture of the company that you choose to work for. And so that was an important part of my decision, was like, do I believe that the culture and what's important to this company aligns with my values? And therefore, if it does, then hopefully the chances of there being a misalignment between what the company is looking to, it feels is important, and I personally feel is important, is going to be much less likely to happen. And so that was hopefully how I've, and that's obviously not just working in the military sector, that's been probably for all the companies that I've joined.
Absolutely. Okay, so defense sector is going through a huge transformation at this moment. And of course, you were at the vantage point in your career, and where you have seen several waves, several revolutions taking place, robotization, AI, and now it's also hitting the defense tech sector. How do you see the sector in the UK specifically? Maybe I would say just the UK, probably it's where you are at the moment, and you have a vantage point as well. Going through, and for the next 2-3 years, do you have any predictions how this is going to unfold? Either by adopting specific technologies or by having this more open innovation mindset where startups and talent that was not going to defense now actually going to the defense sector?
Yeah. I think, in all honesty, I think it's probably a bit too early in my journey with in this industry to have a view on that. So what am I now? I'm sort of like 6 weeks in.
Okay.
So I'm still trying to learn all the acronyms, let alone
it's the average boot camp.
Yeah. But I think, certainly from my perspective, I think it's a very, very positive sign that there are smaller, innovative companies that are being engaged to help solve these problems. That is certainly a very promising time from my perspective, because the solution will be a combination of things, I think. So
are you positive in now enlarging this, not just specifically the defense sector? As you were talking just before the podcast, Europe economic model in many ways seen has rather petrified, right, or acidified in a model which is not producing a lot of growth. Productivity is kind of stalled. But then you have these great examples like Dyson, maybe Cervus, and so on, companies that are actually disrupting in their sectors and proving that the average narrative, it's just the average, right? There's outliers. So are you positive that Europe and the UK will be able to transform their economies in this decade to come, to at least to get or try to cut the US, maybe even the Chinese economy?
I am. I think it'll be very, very interesting to see, I think, what impact technology like generative AI has on, because I think that the potential for changing how everybody is working is phenomenal. So I think that's very, very exciting, but also terrifying in equal measure, probably, because of the amount of change that that's going to bring. So I think the potential for doing things differently now is significant, and probably significant. Doing things differently quicker is probably significantly higher than it's ever been. So I think the potential is there, and I think and so the people that I've been interacting with in the UK from agile conferences, etc., I think the mindset is there to be doing that stuff. So I absolutely don't see a reason why we won't be able to compete in that area.
Very well. Well, thank you so much for having the time to do this podcast with us. It was a real pleasure. And I think we've basically covered most of the questions. Obviously, we'll be delighted to keep the conversation going, but we are bounded by time, and I don't want to take much more than the hour that you promised and you committed for this podcast. But any upcoming projects or initiatives that you're involved, maybe a new world Guinness record that is coming up for 2025?
I mean, to be honest, I'm just immersing myself in a new sector at the moment, so I'm not really focused much more on than that. But I'd be delighted to be discussing with people who are doing a similar thing, so looking to bring a different way of working into the defense area. Also, I'm always happy to talk about people that are working on software on physical products and the challenges that brings, because I've been doing that for a long time, and it's great to talk about the different ways of approaching that.
And you've been doing it for the B2C sector, which is even arguably harder, right? Because B2C clients are unforgiving.
Yeah.
How can people find more about you, Andy, or interact
LinkedIn,
with you?
So LinkedIn, Andy Nesling, same on Twitter, or X, sorry, as it is now. I mean, in terms of understanding a bit more about how I've worked in the past, if you look for Andy Nesling on YouTube, you'll find quite a few conference talks from Agile on the Beat and other Agile conferences talking about all this sort of stuff.
All right. And who knows, at Productized Conference 2025 as well, we're going to have you here in Lisbon. And in the meantime, of course, for anyone listening, don't forget to subscribe to the Productized podcast and follow our guests on LinkedIn, or maybe interact with Andy. I think this would be a wonderful opportunity to know more about him. Don't miss out the next podcast. And stay tuned. Productized Conference 2025 is coming very, very soon. We'll be announcing ticket sales. So there we go. And the first speakers as well. Hopefully beginning 2025 we'll be doing that.